In the American Revolution, both the British and American governments and their armies viewed enslaved persons as mere pawns, to be used, rewarded, or sacrificed as needed to win the war. When British soldiers captured rebel plantations, they divided up the spoils, including the slaves. When Patriot soldiers captured Loyalist plantations, they did the same. As roving bands of both Patriots and Loyalists plundered and pillaged throughout the countryside in the latter years of the war, they commandeered all slaves they could find for their personal use or sale. Official proclamations on both sides cajoled, threatened, promised, and implied, attempting to sway the enslaved population to their side, each side claiming to have the slaves' best interest at heart, while in reality trying to manipulate them for their own purposes. Faced with competing and contradictory claims on their loyalties and abilities, who were the enslaved people to trust? Who were they to believe? And what action were they to take based on the situation at hand? We cannot say the enslaved believed the Patriots and sided with them, or the enslaved believed the British and sided with them, for one simple, inescapable fact. The enslaved people of America weren't a single unthinking body, easily led. They were individual men and women who, despite their condition of involuntary servitude, retained their ability to think their own thoughts, make up their own minds, and take the actions they felt best for themselves, regardless of what white society on either side wished them to do. Of choices made and not made, guided by their own reasoning and the situation at hand, let us now hear some of the long, silent, enslaved voices of the American Revolution speak.
I remember, it was back in late December of '78. I had been sent down to Savannah to pick up goods that my old master, Mr. George Galphin, had secured for his trading post in the Creek lands between the Flint and Chattahoochee rivers. Mr. Ray and Mr. Dunham had sent some of their people along to pick up goods and share the lading. There had been talk from Savannah up to Augusta and into the back country for a while about the British raids that kept coming up from East Florida. But the Georgia militia and the Continental regulars couldn't agree on a course of action. Well, the British made the decision for them when they landed troops 2 miles south of the city. Outnumbered 3-1, those rebel Americans lost the city pretty quick. From what I hear, thanks in no mean way to a Negro from Savannah who showed the King's soldiers a path around the defenses. Now when that happened, we had to get our loaded wagons out of the city as fast as could be and get on the road back up to Augusta, with the British on our heels the whole way. Now riding in the wagon with me were Andrew, belonging to Mr. Ray, and John, belonging to Mr. Dunham. The three of us each knew about Lord Dunmore's proclamation that promised the freedom of slaves to American rebels who left their owners and joined the royal forces. We were the last in line on the road, so we fell into examining what chances we might hazard in the present circumstance. I looked at Andrew and John, flat out said, I'm running to the British. What y'all gonna do? And then Andrew, he was driving the wagon. He says, what we gonna do? First thing we gonna do is think, which looks like you done skipped over doing. Dunmore made that proclamation in Virginia. In case you ain't noticed, we in Georgia. Besides that, what if you get caught by the Americans trying to reach the British? What if you get captured serving with the British? What if you catch the smallpox from the soldiers, like so many do? What if the British sell you down to the West Indies, like we heard has happened to some? What if the British don't win, and they got to give you back, and you got to face punishment for running? John just looked at Andrew, shook his head, rolled his eyes, and said, what if? I got no need for what if. I got no time for what if. Now, there ain't much sure in this world, and there might not be anything sure in it. But I never had a chance good as this to be free, and there's no way to know if I'm gonna have another. Day in, day out, a slave don't ever have a chance, don't ever have a choice. Now we got both. I'm taking them. John and me looked at Andrew. He didn't give a reply. Just gave us both a glance and then matter-of-factly eased back on the reins. John and me straightened up As the horses responded by slowing down, Andrew shook his head, whistled, and said, "Looks like these horses are played, and with them redcoats not too far behind." Then he smiled and said, "Oh well." And that's how it came that we went to the British. They received us readily, and I began to feel the happiness of liberty, of which they knew nothing before. Now that ain't to say I didn't see some of what Andrew had worried on. I saw men dying of smallpox and camp fever. I saw some that thought they were getting freedom sold off. I saw some captured away from the British. But Andrew, John, and me, and thousands others, come through it all, free, thanks to the British. Now you may have noticed in my story, I mentioned Andrew and John by name, but haven't told you my own name. Well, that's because that story's from when I was enslaved. When I left behind slavery, I left behind my slave name. So I am honored to introduce myself to you by my new name, the name I chose. I am British Freedom. It has been 10 years since the Battle of Kettle Creek back in '79, when we Patriots of Georgia militia decisively defeated and scattered a Loyalist militia force that was on its way to British-controlled Augusta. I well remember the day, the chill February morning air, the thin light of the winter sun, crashing volley of the musket fire with its flash and smoke, and the boom of our cannon, which I served as crew on. On that cold day, we had hot work, with our cannon keeping the Loyalists in place with shot after shot while our soldiers surrounded them. Of course, the enemy didn't just sit there. They fired back as well, and I took a shot to the thigh, causing a wound that has given me pain and disability since. I was the only Negro wounded that day, because I was the only one of my race on the field of battle. Though other Negroes did fight at other battles, and as a slave, I shouldn't have been fighting at all. So you could well ask how I came to be at that battle. It was on account of my master, Richard Aycock of Wilkes County, Georgia. You see, in the late 1770s, he was ordered to report for military service, and he did not wish to go. At that time, you could hire a substitute to fight in your place. In order to avoid military service himself, Aycock sent me to join the Georgia militia as a substitute. To address objections that I was a slave, Aycock claimed I had been born free. And so was that I came to be serving as an artilleryman in the Battle of Kettle Creek on February 14th, 1779. As I said, I was severely wounded in the thigh during the fighting, and Giles Harris, a white soldier, took me to his home to care for the wound. It's 1789, 10 years on, and I daily remember Mr. Harris's kindness, because I work for the Harris family to this very day. And not as a slave, but as a free man. For because of my service and battle wound, the Georgia legislature provided the funds to emancipate me, to buy my freedom from my owner, Richard Aycock. They further granted me land, 50 acres, in recognition of my military service during the Revolution, the only Negro Georgia so honored. I can tell you this, however. I'm aware of the curiosity that this war for freedom was waged, in part, by men who denied to others. It is self-evident, and God has given me the faculties to perceive it. And I will tell you this plainly. Though in this world of us, master and slave, black and white, soldiers like Mr. Harris and I have been through this war together. And we have seen together those of my color marching, drilling, fighting, dying, and prevailing. Not as ebony sons of Africa, but as Americans. There are some, like my old owner Acock, who may have come through this fiery trail unchanged in their opinion on perpetual servitude, on slavery. Such is not the case with others, such as Giles Harris and certain members of the Georgia legislature. I will not undertake to predict the future, but at this moment, in 1789, with a new constitution and a Bill of Rights submitted to the people, I dare allow myself to hope that, ere long, the rest of my race may join me in my condition of liberty. But we shall see.